of all, we cannot have a conversation around feminism and emancipation of African women without addressing sex, sexuality, and pleasure. Tumelo Moreri, a medicine woman from Botswana, says that sexual pleasure is your birthright. You are listening to the Africana Woman podcast. I'm your host, Chulu. Every week, I ask an Africana woman to invite us into her home to give us a snapshot into what happens behind her closed doors. I hope you will join me on this journey of discovery, revelation, and self-awareness. I'm not going to lie, it may become uncomfortable sometimes. However, I encourage you to push past your unease and challenge yourself to think differently. The simple act of expanding yourself to receive the unknown may be transformational for you. Full disclosure, this is not a conversation I am comfortable having. I know it is necessary, so I will take one for the team. Let's face it, sex, sexuality, and pleasure are a natural biological function of our bodies. So why is it that overwhelmingly women feel a deep sense of shame and guilt about it? We have been taught from a very young age to equate sex with a negative consequence. We have been told that sex stains your purity. These types of thoughts are literally programmed into our minds for years. But when it does become socially acceptable to have sex, a woman is supposed to automatically switch off the programming she has had about sex and become, as guys would put it, a freak in the bed. Really? The more philosophical question on the table is what happens when you deny a natural part of yourself? Are you able to fully manifest who you are meant to be if you suppress your sexual expression? Tumelo Moreri and I met on Instagram, and when I looked at her work, I was blown away. I literally think she is saving lives. So I could not resist the chance to invite her to the Africana Woman mic. The conversation you will listen to is actually part of a live recording with a live audience. And so you might hear some references to that. Please enjoy my conversation with Tumelo. So today, as you know, we are talking about sex, sexuality, and pleasure. And I have the pleasure of welcoming Tumelo Moreri to help us talk through this conversation. And I must put a disclaimer out there that even though I am hosting this conversation, I am not necessarily so comfortable with the conversation myself, but I do feel that it's something that is very important, very significant in our lives. I mean, if you're a child and someone starts pulling on you, that's like something that, is a conversation that we all need to have. So I will definitely say this is out of my comfort zone, but I'm still very excited. So Tumelo, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to read your bio for everybody, just so that they can know who Tumelo is, a little bit more about her. So Tumelo is from Botswana, and she is a medicine woman and coach for women and men leaders of African descent, seeking to heal their limiting beliefs around sex, sexuality, and pleasure, and surrender to an exquisite and liberated sexuality and create lives of ease, flow, and joy. That's a lot. That's good. So she is the host of the Tumelo Moreri podcast show, and we'll put up the links definitely. And basically on the show, she talks about sex, sexuality, and pleasure. And she's also the owner of Tumelo Moreri International, where she curates and offers coaching programs for the inner healing and transformation of these purpose-driven individuals. She is a 2018 fellow of the Zanele Mbeki Fellowship Fellowship, whose mandate is to cultivate African feminist leadership, a 2017 Global Shaper of the Global Shapers Community, which is an initiative of the World Economic Forum, and a 2014 alumnus of the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship Program, whose mandate is to build exceptional leadership in Africa. Tumelo holds a degree in actuarial science with distinction and mathematical statistics from the University of Free State in South Africa. So we have a very eclectic woman right here and a smart cookie, and I'm very excited that she is going to take us through this. So Tumelo, please tell us how you got from actual mathematics to sex, sexuality, and pleasure.
Wow. Wow, Chulu, thank you so much for having me here. It's such a joy and an honor to be here with you and to also be in conversation with these beautiful women who are joining us. How did I get from actuarial science to this? This is actually my calling and purpose as a human being on planet Earth in this lifetime. The work on sex, sexuality, and pleasure is, a huge part of why I'm here. And work that evolved and showed itself to me the more I dug deep and explored my own purpose. So the journey began with me. I was still in the second year of my actuarial science degree. And in that year, 2011, I remember just thinking to myself that I wanted a life of meaning, a life of purpose, and doing work that fulfilled me. That was, 9 years ago. And over the past 9 years, I've just journeyed seeking meaning and purpose, and eventually landed on this body of work. And the landing also was gradual. Like my own exploration of sex, sexuality, and pleasure began 5 years ago in 2015. During, I think that year was like my dark night of the soul, when I had my first episode of depression and was asking a lot of questions about who I am, what my place in the world is. And I remember just one night asking Google, so what's the spiritual significance of sex, right? And that then began a whole journey of exploring sex just beyond the physical experience that a lot of us are taught it is. So in a nutshell, that's how it evolved.
Thank you. When I put this out, I got mixed reactions because some people were nervous about just saying the word sex in public. And I think a lot of people were tickled also when the passcode was sex as well. So what is it about that word for African cultures? Just tell us a little bit about that.
So it is a thing about that word and about that act for African cultures and across the globe, So in our world, in our planet as human beings, like we have in so many ways gotten into like very silent agreements about us not speaking openly about sex. Like even just the word sex, like it is such taboo for us to be articulating this word. One other word that I love so much is vagina, that we rarely ever say. I've gotten messages from some people saying that vagina is a vulgar word. And what's so interesting is that like these words they're on our textbooks, right? They are worldly accepted medical terms. And beyond that, like they're not just medical terms, like sex is such a beautiful thing. Most of us actually, I would say majority of the world's population is here because two people somewhere desired each other so deeply and they wanted to be in each other. And then a human being was conceived, right? So it's this thing that we have agreed agreed, silently agreed that it is not to be freely spoken about. It is not to be freely enjoyed, right? And so we find that the world over, and especially in our African communities, there is a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, and a lot of guilt. Like in our religious communities, there is a lot of guilt around just enjoying this beautiful thing and enjoying our bodies, right? So the ladies in the room, you might have come across teachings that say that pleasures of the body are not to be indulged in, right? That if you're indulging in such pleasures, in such exquisite, mouth-watering pleasures, then it's a sin, right? So, like, if you just look at our socialization and our human conditioning, it is one that teaches majority of human beings to be ashamed of sex, the word, to articulate it, to be ashamed of sex, the act, to be embarrassed about it, to be embarrassed about their bodies, and to feel guilty for enjoying this thing that we've been told is bad or evil. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, you talk about how we've been socialized to be, to have shame and embarrassment and feel guilty about it. But then can you walk us through what the kind of the life experience of somebody and that term or act of sex is? Because in my mind, I'll give an example. Like in Zambia, we have a practice called pulling, which is pulling of the clitoris, right? And as I understand it, it happens when, I think maybe a lot more in the past, but when you were much younger and the pulling would start of your clitoris. So you're already introduced at a certain age. And then, you get to another age where they say, okay, going to get married or whatever it is. And, there's education around having sex and all of that. But, just take us through this journey, this sex journey that a lot of African people do experience.
Yeah, it's so painful for me. It's such a heartbreaking one for me. Mm-hmm. The experiences that many human beings have, and especially Africans around sex, right? So somebody in the comments was saying now that this is not a conversation that happens in the home, right? So as human beings, from a very young age, we are aware of our sexuality. Like, we're aware of ourselves as sexual beings, right? So some of us might have touched ourselves while we were still young and felt the pleasure that comes from touching ourselves. Like, we would have just been aware of it somehow, right? That, we're sexual beings. But what then happens in the home, maybe when an adult sees you touching your woman parts, they would scold you, tell you that you're not supposed to touch yourself there, right? And also, while growing up, you might have witnessed the adults around you, like your primary caretakers or your parents, seeming deeply embarrassed and uncomfortable about their bodies, just hiding their bodies. Sex is something that is hidden. In our African society communities, intimacy is something that is hidden. It's rare for us to see our parents being intimate, just hugging one another, just kissing each other and expressing love for each other. Those are things that are hidden. A lot of us as Africans, we would have accidentally found out about sex. Maybe you were sleeping in the same room with mom and dad, and then in the middle of the night, you see dad on top of mom or something, But even when you witness that, that this is not something I can ask about, because already there has been some sort of like very implicit and subtle teaching socialization that sex, intimacy is not something that we talk about, my child, hush, hush. Yeah. And oof, gosh, just at the minimum, the conversation about sex is not one that takes place in our African homes. Intimacy is not something, and that's why a lot of us struggle with intimacy, like it has never been demonstrated to us. And maybe it is, if it has been demonstrated, it is in very few cases that it's a healthy intimacy, where you see both mom and dad giving and receiving in a very healthy manner. So, yeah. And especially for women, like when you get your first menstrual period, for example, the teaching for a lot of girls is that, so now that you've gotten your first bleed, if you play with boys, you're going to fall pregnant, right? And so then we learn to associate sex with pregnancy and with shame, right? So if you were, like the equation is sex is equals to pregnancy and is equals to shame for the family. If you were to fall pregnant as a woman, in a lot of our cultures, we have many names for women who fall pregnant outside of wedlock. Many derogatory words, such that as a woman in your 20s or in your early 30s, I mean, you're old enough to have babies and you can probably afford to raise those babies. But every time after having sex with a delicious man or a delicious human being, you are there scared that you might be pregnant, and afraid that you're going to bring shame to the family. So it is, it's quite intense and a lot. Yeah. And you also mentioned this practice that you guys have in Zambia, which is like those are it's the politics of pleasure for the human for the woman body. So we find that there are a lot of like cultural politics around women's sexuality and the bodies of women and pleasure for women, right? So when in some communities, when girls are being taught about sex, it's usually how to pleasure the man, right? Mm-hmm. And what I'm finding in my work with women is that like some women would fake orgasms, right? And like there are a lot of experiences, and with fake orgasms would not be able to share with the partner what they want in bed, would not be able to communicate when they haven't gotten that climax, right? And when you look at the root of some of those, it's the socialization that sexual pleasure is for the man, right? In my Setswana culture, when women get married, like in that initiation ceremony, after like the initiation ceremony of newly married women, they're told that like you must cook the pots regularly and you must cook them really, really nice, right? And the implicit message there is that the food is not for you, it's for the man, right? Meaning that your sexual pleasure and indulgence is not a thing of priority. And if the man goes and cheats, it's your fault. Like, yeah, it's quite like the work, it's so vast, right? And the experiences of women are so vast and so multi-layered.
So I guess I should ask, do you think that if women begin to claim that they also want to experience pleasure in sex, do you think that is watering down African cultures?
I think it would be a healing and a bringing to wholeness of our experiences as human beings, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of our African cultures are quite patriarchal. They are founded on patriarchal beliefs and practices, right? And so what I'm finding is that the invitation that we're getting is to look at what resonates true about our holistic experience as human beings. There's a lot of good in our cultural in our cultural practices and beliefs and rituals, a lot of good, right? But there's also a lot that is not working for us collectively as both men and women and non-binary beings, right? And so the invitation, we don't want to divorce our culture. It's such a beautiful thing, but the invitation is to look at what is true, what is filling, what is life affirming, and begin to lean into that. I believe our society is better off with women being sexually liberated. Like our society would flourish with women being sexually liberated. And let me share with you now why, right? So when you look at it energetically, so we're energetic beings, and my work on sex, it's deeply spiritual, right? So energetically and spiritually, for those who might be aware, the human has energetic portals, which are called chakras, right? They are, the energetic portals, and each chakra controls or governs a particular human experience, right? So sensuality, matters of sensuality and creativity and your emotions, that are governed by the same chakra, called the sacral chakra, around your womb area, right? So at the top, you have your crown chakra, you have your third eye, you have your throat chakra, you have your heart chakra. We could share more information about this, right? But the sacral chakra governs matters of sensuality. It governs matters of creativity. It governs how you engage your emotions, right? And so for sexually repressed women and all human beings, when any human being is sitting with the repressed sexual energy, it tends to block the sacral chakra, right? And you can imagine that when your sacral chakra is blocked or underperforming, that affects your creativity. It affects your very genius. It also affects whether you're able to clearly communicate your mission to the world and to manifest that mission. I mean, the womb area, oh my God, sexual liberation is this connected to your womb area and to your ability to birth ideas, to birth human beings, to birth projects, to birth a new world. So even now with COVID, we're being invited to birth a new world, right? And so we are needing to be connected to our creativity. We're needing to be connected to our genius, to build dreams. So when we're sexually repressed, we're actually disconnected from that, to our very essence, to create lives, to create our very lives and to transform the world. So our African cultures actually want, they want for women to be sexually liberated. Imagine as a man having a sexually liberated woman, the both of you get to thoroughly enjoy each other. And sexual energy also has the power, just to propel you, to enhance your life, to help you build magnificent life and magnificent life experiences. So we're finding that when women are sexually repressed, men actually don't get to fully explore it as well. It's not they're actually benefiting. When we go to the core, they're not really benefiting from women being sexually repressed. Let me put a comment.
So, okay. Now, I would want to find out from you, because, we come from societies that are, yes, there's the African cultural aspects, but then there's also that religious aspect of Christianity, of Islam. I'd think more so Buddhism, and other religions are less popular. Yes, they do exist, and Hinduism do exist in Africa. But the two prominent ones being Christianity and Islam, then have found a way to sort of coexist with our African culture. Now, when you talk about things like chakra, people already are like shutting down, like, oh my God, you're bringing this foreign concept into our belief system. So what would you say about that? Is it going against someone's religion? Because, I know a lot of people are... they are devout in their beliefs, in whether it's Christianity or whether it's Islam. So how do you bring those together?
Okay. So I would say that the term chakra itself would be that which might be foreign to us, right? But our African elders, like, these are things that our African elders were aware of in ancient African communities, right? Like, even when you go into the churches that have fused like the religions of Christianity or Islam with our core African practices and beliefs, you will actually find that they are aware of our being energetic and spiritual beings, right? It's just that they might have different terms for it, or they might have like different conceptualization of it, right? Like, I'm actually thinking of specific churches here in Botswana. I don't know if you guys have ZCC in, like, it's the Zion Christian Church, right? They are actually aware of chakras. Like, some of the ways in which they dance is in ways of activating the chakras, right? So, like, the energy, like, energy is such a universal thing. Even in science, like, for those who might have like done science in school, you were taught that everything is energy. It can't be destroyed. It can only like be transformed from one form to another, right? Everything is matter. So we are matter and we are energy, right? And yeah, it's just that like some of the teachings we might have acquired. Like, for me, I had to like study Eastern traditions to be aware of them. And then the deeper I went, the more I realized that it actually already existed in my own community and in my own culture, So yeah, like, that journey has also been interesting to see that. And nothing is by coincidence. I mean, I don't think it's by accident that I had to go study the Eastern tradition a bit, and then come back home and be like, whoa, it was actually always here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, these things, they are alive. They are alive in our African communities. It's just that I think with like the era of colonialism, right?
Yeah.
We lost a lot of this knowledge. We lost a lot of these like very potent traditions. In ancient African communities, our elders were so in tune, like they were aware of the existence of spirit. And like, spirit was part of our daily way of being. Like, oh my God, during plowing season, there would be like some ritual that was done. During the harvest season, there would be, and like, it didn't have to be a hectic ritual, it was just a recognition that there is something grander and bigger than us, regardless of the phrases, the wording that we use for it.
So, we always come back in most of our conversations. We always come back to this. What was it like pre-colonial times, And for us who are living in this time, how do we find the resources? Is there any literature that we can read that may talk about, the African sexuality pre-colonial times? Or, where do we go to find that type of information? Is it totally lost? Help us.
Oh, Chulu. May I say that I'm really enjoying being in conversation with you. Yeah, I'm just enjoying how it's flowing and how you're leading it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So I So there seems to be little literature around sexuality, African sexuality specifically, and pre-colonialism and all of that. So one, I would say it is not lost, right? And I'll share two reasons why I say that. But I have a book here that might interest you guys. It is a book by Sobonfu Some. Sobonfu Some is of the Dagara community of Burkina Faso. And the book, let me just put it here. I hope you guys can see.
The Spirit of Intimacy.
The Spirit of Intimacy, Ancient African Teachings in the Ways of Relationships. Guys, our ancestors knew beautiful things. Yo. So if you're really interested in exploring your sexuality, I mean, I'm here. I am here. I'm doing this work on sex, sexuality, and pleasure, and specifically for African women, right? Many of my clients are men. So I also do one-on-one coaching work if you want to go deep, right? So some of my clients are men, but I have a podcast, I have a blog. You can also join my emailing list, where I just weekly share and teach on these things, right? Two, there is this book, and so this book is specifically on intimacy, right? And there's a chapter on sexuality, and there's also where they share how in our African culture, a man and a woman would come together in a sacred circle, and how that sexuality and that sex was a very intentional thing, It's so beautiful. So this is the only book that I know that only deals with sexuality and intimacy. And the other books that I have, they have only a chapter, not an entire book. So this book, The Awakened Woman, is by Dr. Tererai Trent. She is from Zimbabwe. And she has a chapter in here about harnessing your sensuality, right? Oh, it's so delicious. The other book, and there are a few other books. So on my website, I also have an online library of resources. There's a document I put together with some of these books. I think we could share with the ladies in here. So that how to access my online library. The author of this book is Sobonfu Some.
I'm just trying to type it for people so that they catch it. Tererai Trent is the Awakened Woman, right?
Yes, the Awakened Woman. I think maybe we could also send maybe a follow-up email after this conversation. Yeah, with all the resources that that people could check out, right? And there's a lady in South Africa. Her name is Matilo Motsei. She also has a book, and she just speaks very briefly about sexuality. So what I'm finding is that there are very few books that only focus on sex, sexuality, and you'd find a random chapter here and there, but that shouldn't keep us from exploring it. Just the chapter from The Awakened Woman awakened a lot for me. So please check it out.
All right. So, okay. Thank you for those resources. I think what I also want to ask you about is, I think in most cultures, I guess, sexuality or when you are allowed to have sex is when you get married, right? However, you find that in our current times, a lot of women are getting married at a later stage. I think probably, a really long time ago, it was maybe in your teens, like 16 to 19, and then it shifted to, a lot of people getting married in their 20s. But now we're seeing the shift of a lot of people getting married in their 30s, and then there's all this time. So for basically your sex education is at the time of marriage, you see. So now you find that you've got 30 years where you haven't learned about sex, but people are still going into it. So what would your advice be to a woman, or I guess for parents? When should they be talking to their children about sex? What's the appropriate age? If you're in your 20s right now and you're on the call, or if you're in your 30s and, you haven't really had that education, you just said, okay, let me just jump into this thing and let me see how it goes. What would your advice be to that person?
Okay, so I'll start with somebody who might be here in their 20s, 30s and hasn't had any education, right? So like if this is something that you're drawn to, that you'd like to explore, I would highly encourage that you do that exploration. Again, I'll say I'm here. I haven't come across many platforms on the African continent where somebody is teaching and facilitating conversation on this, right? So yeah, I have a Facebook community. That might be your first stop, right? Second, we need to know that our sexuality and our being sexual beings is something very, very natural, right? So I think that's like our sexual urges, they're very, very natural. There is nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with having sexual desires, with having sexual urges. And I usually say, just as we are intentional and we make plans about our finances, we also need to be intentional and make plans, growth plans for our sexuality and pleasure. You know why? Because our sexuality is one of the areas that bring us intense, immense joy. Like an orgasm, my sisters, it's something so beautiful. And yeah, that's something we really need to be intentional about. Like, it's so delicious for its own sake. And we deserve pleasure. May I say that? We are deserving of pleasure. Pleasure is our birthright. It was not created for nothing. So your sexual urges are very natural. Your desire for pleasure, your desire for sexual intimacy is very, very, very natural. And it is okay to open a website page, to open a book and look this up, right? And in terms of what the appropriate age is for talking to children about sex. So the beautiful thing about us as human beings, like as in our growth journey, we navigate, like as we're navigating through, we're constantly giving cues about what we're ready for, right? Mm. So as a parent, and you might have experienced this as well, as a parent, like your child will let you know when they're ready for a conversation on sex. Like they will ask something, like that's them telling you that, mommy, I'm ready for my first conversation, right? And sadly, what happens is that because we ourselves, the adults, because we're very uncomfortable with this thing, when the child, like it could be a child who's like 6 years old, right? Like they show you that they want to have their first conversation. What usually happens for a lot of us is that then we just, like, we shut down, close down, we close any opportunity, like we close any possibility for that conversation to happen, right? So, and to facilitate that, to heal that experience, the first person you need to work on is yourself, right? So you need to work on yourself and like just exercise your comfort muscles around talking about sex, right? The first conversation.
But who do you talk to? You're saying exercise those muscles, like you're talking in the mirror, you're talking with your girlfriends. Who are you talking to? Because I feel like maybe some people have never even talked about this with their girlfriends. I haven't, so just putting a disclaimer out there.
Sure, you know, like as the women were coming into this Zoom call, I was like, I wish we had a whole day for this. Like for me to just facilitate workshop and get us just talking, just go one by one, you know, have somebody say the word sex, you know. So I think maybe the first thing is to like immerse yourself in communities where you can talk about sex, right? So I highly recommend my Facebook group for women. It's a private Facebook only for women, where we have conversation about sex, about pleasure, about intimacy, right? And we also have conversation about how to create the deep intimacy that you desire for your life. My role as a coach and as a medicine woman is to facilitate conversation and to facilitate healing for women who want to deeply explore their sexuality and to reclaim the very erotic and birthright sexuality, right? So just like immerse yourself in communities that are non-judging, you know, where you can just have conversation about this. Guys, I'm here, okay? I'm here. Like, use me, like, let me be the place where you come to exercise your comfort muscles around talking about sex.
Okay, so that was the first thing. You work on yourself, and then exercising those muscles to talk about sex so that you're then able to talk about it with your child. What's the next step?
You mean in navigating this journey with our children?
Yes, with our children, yes.
Yeah. So you find that when you've grown just a little bit more comfortable to talk about sex, then you're able to have these conversations with your children, right? And like your comfort level also informs your ability or your capacity to talk to them at their level, right? So when you've done the work, when it's healing work, actually, when you've done the inner healing work of it's of healing the shame and the embarrassment around sex. Like you're able to better comfortably find the language that your children would understand, right? Like when they're 6, you don't necessarily have to be telling them about sex positions. No, like you just create safe space for them to begin exploring their own sexuality, right? And somebody might say, whoa, are you encouraging children to have sex? That's not what we're saying, right? We're actually on this call because a lot of us at a young age, we were like we what we were shown was that sex is a bad thing. And that's why a lot of us are struggling, right? A lot of women, when they're young, you're told, close your legs, don't let boys see your inner thighs. And then it's not a surprise that in our adult years, when you want to go at it with your person, you struggle to open your legs because there's that wounding. There's that message at the back of your psyche that said, close your legs. A dignified woman should close her legs. If you want to get married, you must be dignified, you know? And then you get into your marriage and you're not like you're not willing to explore, you know? So like the inner healing work is just like healing the socialization, healing the conditioning, so that you may be able to find liberty, like explore it with liberty, with exuberance, with excitement, with joy. Yeah.
Okay. So, ladies, you've heard. One, if you are in this age, it's okay to explore and find out more information, and then also find a safe space where you can do so, whether it is in a Facebook group like Tumelo's or with your girlfriends, where there's no judgment, but find that safe space so that you start to exercise your muscles. And just like the way you learn mathematics, first you learn about addition, and then it adds on, you learn about multiplication, and then you learn about division. So when you're having conversations with your children, you're building up on that knowledge, not that we go from zero to, explicit when they're, in their 20s, their 30s. So, yeah.
You know what's also strange for me, Chulu? Like what's also strange for me is this expectation within our society for people to know how to do it. Like there's so much shame when you don't know how to do it, right? And yet also there's shame when you want to explore how to do it. Like it's so weird, right? So like your body knows, like even if you are in your 30s and you haven't had sex, like you don't have to worry about like figuring it all out. Yeah, like it does help to learn because we have a lot of like conditioning that disconnects us from our sexuality. But when you're coming from a healed place, a place of wholeness, your body knows, girl. Like it knows how to do the things. It knows how to ride if you want to ride. It knows how to do all the things. And so, like, let's not obsess about like having it all figured out. I'm for healing so that you may return to your natural rhythm, so that you may return to your natural instincts of knowing what you want, what you desire, and how to dance, Okay,
so let's explore this topic of orgasms. I think it's quite... I don't want to say popular, but anyway, I think at some stage in people that are sexually active, they have, faked an orgasm, or maybe they have never even experienced an orgasm. So just tell us a little bit more about what is the block in, why a woman would not have experienced an orgasm, and, how does one liberate themselves? Which is basically the whole conversation. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. It's another thing that breaks my heart, primarily because of the socialization, the conditioning, right? I think at the initial, I want to say, so the culture around sex, and this is global as well, is one that is like that is orgasm seeking. It's like the sexual engagement. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I've just seen a question. There's it's like, please explain what an orgasm is. Like starting from the definition of what an orgasm is before we go further into it.
So an orgasm would be like the other word for it is it's climax, like the peak of your sexual encounter. Yeah. But it is extreme pleasure. Somebody's saying extreme pleasure. So it's the peak when you arrive at that peak, and it is more than like in my own studies, more than just the physical experience. It's a very, very powerful experience that can actually also be leveraged to create the life of your desires. From what I've studied and what I practice, like when you are at that climax, you're literally one with all of life. You're one with God. Like you could manifest beautiful things just by tapping into that energy. Somebody's saying it's a release. So there is some release that happens. Like men would ejaculate, some women would squirt, right? But when we just look deeply into it, like it's that peak when you reach the peak of that sexual experience. Yes. So you're asking about orgasms, right? And I was saying how, like the predominant culture around sex, it's one that is like almost like goal oriented, like that is orgasm focused, right? And So orgasms are such beautiful things. And yes, to having orgasms, right? But I think what we also miss in the orgasm seeking nature of sex is that we tend to miss out on the pleasure, right? So when we speak of pleasure is more than just the orgasm. The pleasure, it's more than just the reaching the summit of the mountain. The pleasure is also when you're building up, right? When you're building up to that orgasm, even after, right? I think somebody in the comments said that when we speak about sex, we also want to speak about love, right? So some people might want to bring in the conversation of intimacy as well, right? That the pleasure, you might want to enjoy this intimacy with your partner even before penetration. Actually, a lot of women love foreplay, right? I think some of the reasons why we might want to have lubricants is that, and I've had a conversation with a man on my podcast about how a lot of men skip that foreplay. They're not aware of it, right? But the foreplay is what actually has the potential to turn a woman on, to have her secreting these juices within her woman parts that will lubricate her vagina, and make sex a very pleasurable thing. So my work around pleasure also includes that, just a conversation and work around us getting to realize that the sexual pleasure is more than just the penetration, and it's more than just the climax, right?
Okay.
There's so much to enjoy, right? So yeah, my encouragement is definitely have your orgasm. It's such a beautiful thing, but also expand your experience of the pleasure to know that it's more than just the orgasm, right? And I think you're asking why some women struggle with orgasms, right? Predominantly the conditioning, the socialization that sometimes creates those inner blocks. So some women might experience numbness, right? Or just blocks that are experienced physically, right? You might just find that your vagina is not sensitive enough. There's numbness. There is resistance to opening up to the pleasure, right? And sometimes what also happens is what I also explore with women is the beliefs that they hold around their bodies, right? So you might find that somebody might be experiencing a lot of shame about their body, and therefore not being able to just be comfortable and fully surrender, because orgasms they invite us to surrender to the pleasure, right? But if we still have hang-ups around our bodies, so what usually happens is that some of what might happen is that during sex you might be stuck in your head, just thinking a lot of things. Oh my God, am I good enough? Am I beautiful enough? Oh my God, will I have the orgasm? The pleasure is in the body. The body is the potter of the pleasure. So part of the work we do is just of getting you out of your head and into your body, right? So looking at the beliefs that you hold around your body, healing that shame that you might hold around your body, healing that shame that you might hold around your vagina. There is this belief that vaginas are ugly, vaginas are to be hidden, vaginas are dirty. And so even as a man is penetrating you, you are worried about your vagina. Is it smelling right? That can keep you from fully surrendering to this experience of pleasure. So it's quite multi-layered. It's very nuanced for a lot of women. Like we mentioned earlier, there are also beliefs around pleasure for women. Many of our cultures teach young girls and women that the pleasure is for the man, right? And so you walk into a sexual interaction or engagement already wanting to please the other person. And so, I was having a conversation with this gentleman. on my podcast, so we're having this conversation about the socialization that teaches that women are not worthy of sexual pleasure, and what that does for men. Like you might find that women, like there's also this belief that like it's hard to make a woman come, right? So some men might actually not even try because they already believe, it's already hard, I can't make her come, so let me not even just, right? So like it's all this socialization and conditioning that keeps us from fully enjoying our sexuality.
I have two more questions for you, and if we can get to them real quick. So the first question is, it takes two to tango. And there's a lot of education for the woman, but then what happens to the man? You see what I mean? Especially if, people right now, I can see there's like married women or women that are in, serious relationships. And then they are here, they're getting educated. But then, what can they do to encourage their partner to also get some form of help, healing, because or find resources. How can a woman also talk to a man about this? Because I imagine anyway that you may be in a relationship and you may be actually sexually active, but then you're not able to communicate about it to your partner. You're just doing it. So anyway, that's my second last question.
Okay, yeah. Okay, shall I go at it now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So just at the tail end, when you're saying like you're just doing it, I was thinking about how what happens for some couples is that they do it and then pretend that it didn't happen. Like that's how it actually gets. Like that's how it's sad actually. Like they would have sex in the bedroom, they get to the kitchen, they pretend we were just not inside each other. And so what I have found with this, so it's a struggle to talk to your partner about sex, right? Quite similar to what I shared about like how to navigate the journey with children. It's quite similar to our intimate relationships as well. So you might find that as a woman or man in this call, you might struggle to talk to your partner about your sex and your sex life. Probably because you yourself are experiencing a lot of shame and embarrassment around it, right? So the first place or our point of departure is yourself, right? And I've seen this with myself in my own journey in healing my own sexuality and deeply exploring it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which began 5 years ago. The more I did the work, the more I was able to communicate with my partners. The more I was able to call a whole conference and say, comrade, I did not get my orgasm, right? So the more you do the work, the more liberated you become, the more knowing you are that you deserve sexual pleasure as a woman. And the more you're able to talk about it with your partner, like what we find that like the struggle to talk about it is like hugely in part because you yourself are deeply uncomfortable about it, right? So we want to work on that discomfort. And when you work on that discomfort, I mean, it is going to unleash other beautiful things. Then you're able to begin to comfortably talk about it, right? And if your partner is somebody who's willing to learn and to grow together, then they might join you in that dance, right? And what I also noticed in my own journey is that the more I did this work of sexually liberating myself, it tunes your frequency, it tunes your internal vibe, right? Like as we're working on these beliefs, like we're literally shifting your makeup, like your inner makeup as a human being, right? And as you do the work, it shifts your inner makeup, and you begin to shift what you attract into your life. Like you find that you begin to also shift the type of men or partners into your life, right? Wow. We're creators of our own realities, right? And how our lives look is predominantly informed by the core beliefs that we hold around what life is supposed to look like, around what we are deserving of, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in your life right now and you're unsatisfied with what you have created or what you're attracting, we want to go to the core of you, right? Because right now, if you're dating a man who is not fully available for you, we want to look at your beliefs around intimacy. We want to look at what you acquired in your socialization and conditioning about what you are deserving as a woman who looks like you, right? So when we want to, and this is the intimacy work I do with my clients, when we want to shift the quality that you attract into your life, we go into like your core beliefs, right? So, gosh, I hope I've answered that.
I love that. No, I love that, because that's also the work that I do with women. We go into the, what are your core beliefs? Because your beliefs are what will inform your actions. So if you don't know what your beliefs are, then, you're basically being controlled by a silent puppet and you don't even realize it. So I love what you just said, everything about what you just said. So my final question is, what would you tell people about, like, what is your what would you tell people about sex? What would you want them to know and think about sex? Because I think there's also a lot of unlearning to do. So if there was that one thing that they had to learn about the term, the word, the experience, sex, what would it be?
Wow. Just one thing.
Okay, no, not one thing. If you've got a couple of things, because I know there's a lot. Yeah. This is your work.
There is a lot, actually. One, like, it's a beautiful experience and manifestation of who you are as a human being. It's a beautiful manifestation and experience of who you are. Sex, SEX, could also be seen as an acronym of synergistic energetic exchange. Okay. It's an exchange of energy, right? And yeah, this is why sometimes we want to look out for the people we sleep with, because we exchange energy with them, right? It's that deep, guys, and delicious.
Yeah. So I think in like Christian terms, they'll call it soul ties, because, you're having that energetic exchange with somebody else. And, yes. You don't want to be tied to the wrong person.
And I want to say, so part of what I'd love for us to do is to heal the fear, because I really call it soul ties, because I'm aware of the fear within that phrase, like you're tied forever. You can actually untie, like there's nothing you could do wrong, literally. There's nothing permanent, right? So we want to act responsibly, but I want us to release the fear as well, that you could do something so tragically wrong and ruin your relationship with God. No, like, God loves us unconditionally. That means that forgiveness is never ending, right? You want to act responsibly, but there's nothing tragically wrong that you could ever do, nothing, and nothing that you could never heal,
No, I agree.
Some of you thought we would be talking about sexual positions, huh? I'm just teasing. Every time I listen to this episode, I hear how I have personally been socialized to approach sexuality, which is why I know how difficult it can be to break out of the matrix and truly embrace your sexuality. I know of women who get married and literally flinch when their husband tries to initiate sex. Women who are not able to vocalize their needs and boundaries during sex. I don't even have time to get into what consent actually means. Okay, let me give you an example. If you wake up to find your partner conducting a sexual act on your body, sweetie, that's rape. You could not have given consent in your sleep. So him inserting himself inside you, even though you are married or he's your bae, does not make it okay. I'll just leave it there. We need another episode to unpack this. Today, I want you to remember that sex, sexuality, and pleasure is natural and it is your birthright. Normalize having conversations about it. Emancipate your sexuality and embrace your womanhood in its entirety. Please find Tumelo on social media at Tumelo Moreri. She is out here saving lives. Tell her you heard her on the Africana Woman podcast. And thank you, dear listener, for making us part of your day and by listening in. I think it's so amazing. I truly, truly appreciate you. If you liked this episode, please do share it with a friend. And you can find me on Instagram at Chulu by Design. Do say hello. I always respond. Until next week, I want you to remember, know your roots, grow your purpose. This has been a production of Ulendo Creative Media. You can find out more about their services on www.ulendocreative.com.